Afternoon. Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne and I'm the product manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation. And this is, excuse me, I'm just going to adjust my microphone. This is a weekly webinar that we run to cover stuff about the CI Tools. So we'll look at new features in the CI Tools or updates. We will look at how to use certain tools that exist, either from the point of view of someone who's never used them before or covering advanced topics. And sometimes we'll also cover a bunch of frequently asked questions about certain parts of the tools. I'm going through sort of a series at the moment where we are just going over an introduction to each of the CI tools. We've gone through quite a lot of them so far this year. And this week we're going to be looking at the CI Sites tool. So that is a tool that has been available in New Zealand for a very long time, and as of recently is also available in Australia. So if you're a select customer in either country, you already have access to this tool, but maybe you haven't started using it yet, or maybe you just want to see a bit about how it works and maybe check that you're using it in the way that uses all of the functions that we have available. So we're going to have a look at that. I'm going to be working in ArchiCAD 27 today, but I think all of the functionality that we're going to look at is available in older versions as well. So if you're not up to the latest version, the way that everything works here will work very similarly. The only difference will be there is a feature in the Sites tool which we're going to be looking at to do with the boundary shapes. If you're using a version from about ArchiCAD 24 or older, the polyline functionality that we'll see there isn't available in that. It's only in newer versions. But apart from that, everything else should be the same. If you have any questions, please enter those in the chat panel as we're going through. And I'll check on that when we're about halfway through and just see if we've got any questions. And I'll try to answer those if I have time to while we're live. Otherwise, I'll either follow them up with you later or we'll cover them in a future webinar. But yeah, so the CI Sites tool is, as you can probably guess by the name, it's for doing stuff to do with sites. I've got a site here at the moment, but there's a handful of different things that we can do using it. First of all, I'm going to ignore this site here. We're just going to look at creating a site using boundaries. So one of the main functions of the tool is allow you to essentially create the shape of a site or model up a site using boundaries that you've got from a surveyor or something like that. And so as with most of the tools, the way that we get to that is via the CI Tools menu. Go down to Sites, and we're going to choose the Site Boundary Editor here. And what that will do is it'll open this sort of floating palette thing here. And we can go through and we can start entering all of the boundaries. So you probably will have a list of all of the boundaries. You can go through here and start adding those. So to start with, we're going to press this button down here. It's got a little plus on it to indicate it means place a new boundary. We're going to hit that button and we'll click to place till we'll get our starting point. And then once we have this selected, you can see the details of it in our boundary editor here. So the length, the bearing, and the sweep and arc settings if it's a curved boundary. Obviously you could go through and you could grab hold of this and rotate it and stretch it and that sort of thing to make it the right size. But the advantage of using the site boundary editor is that it will essentially let you treat your entire set of boundaries as a sort of a set or a system where you can update some and they will affect the others. So we can go through here and we can say, let's update this one to 7 meters and the bearing will be 47 degrees. And you can see that as I'm entering these values, the selected boundary is updating in real time to show those changes. So we can go through and just make this do whatever it needs to. Obviously, you're not going to be making changes to these as you go. Because you won't be making changes to the boundaries, but as you're creating, you can just make sure that you've got the right ones selected and correct them if you entered the wrong values or anything like that. So we can go through and we can build up our site using this list here. So I can, let's stick with the one that we have here, and we want to add another boundary now, so we hit the plus button again, and you'll see that it will add the second boundary directly onto the end of the first one, so it will just follow along. It'll be the same settings as the previous one, and then we just modify that one to match. So we can say this one is actually 1500 long, and the bearing is, what did we have? We had 45, let's go 120. Okay, and that will come around like that, and then we can just keep going. So we'll hit plus again, we'll modify that, and so on. You probably get the idea. Let's make that one 1200, and we'll make it 200 degrees. Starts coming back around, so we can keep going and building up our boundary as we go. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I want to add a new one. That's missing a 0 there. All right, let's add another one, and we'll start coming back around again. Okay. And then one of the other things we can do, probably you won't do this because you will have an actual list of boundaries you're entering. I'm just making these up on the fly. But we have a sort of a finish this off button here, which will just close up the site for us. So I'm just going to do that just so that we can finish inputting this site. So we have a nice closed polygon here, and you can see that it's all set as this sort of array of boundaries in the dialog here, so I can go back at any point and modify any of these as needed. So if I entered any of these wrong, or maybe we got the wrong data or something like that, we can easily do that. So I could go and grab, say, this one here, and say actually the bearing for that is 33 degrees, and you'll see that it modifies that boundary that we just changed, but it also modifies everything else that is chained onto that. So you're not going to have to go through and update everything else based on that. The origin point of it will move to reflect where you've changed it to, and now our system doesn't join up anymore. So let's just finish it automatically again, so that joins up for us now. So that allows us to create the boundaries for our project, and you can see that these will also obviously, to get the site into your project, this is a good way to do that. So now what we can do is we can select all of those boundaries, and if we go to the CI Tools menu, go down to Sites, we have these two options here. We are going to say in this case that we want to create a mesh from the boundaries. So we've got boundaries selected, and we want to automatically create a mesh that matches them. So we can hit that button, and it will just go through and it'll place down a mesh that fits that shape. So it just saves you the time of having to do that. Obviously, it doesn't have contours on it or anything. It can't know that yet, but it will draw it to the correct shape, and then you can go through and draw your contour lines and that sort of thing on. You can also go the other way as well. So if we didn't have any boundaries yet, but we did have the shape somehow, maybe imported a DWG or something, I'm just going to go through and draw one using a fill. You can have the mesh shape already in ArchiCAD, and what you can do is select the shape and go CI Tools, Sites, and choose to create boundaries from Polygon, and it will do that. It's gone to a different story, but it will do that for us. So you can see it's placed boundaries around in the system. So once I select one, you'll see that it will populate this again with the array of all of those boundaries that we've entered there. So you can see those going all the way around the project now. And we can, oops, we can get rid of that fill now. And now we have boundaries set up, and then again you could continue further and select them all and then go through and create a mesh based on those as well. So long as you have the shape or the boundaries, you can go either way to creating your mesh based on those. Obviously, beyond just helping you create your mesh shape, these will also function as boundaries for your documentation. So it will draw these boundary dashed lines. They've got circles on the ends of them by default, and they show a yard setback here, and then we show the length and the bearing on sort of a label on the boundary itself, but we can modify the way that works as well. So if we look in the settings for this object, you'll be able to see, we'll look at the envelope stuff in a bit, but if we go to label here, you can see what it is showing. So at the moment it is showing 2 lines of text above the boundary line, so you can choose how you want those to be laid out. And we're showing on line 1, we're showing the length in meters, and on line 2 we're showing the D, which is the bearing, and we don't have any unit entered for that one. So it's showing those 2 bits of information, but we can change those to whatever we want. You could see the options that are available here, so you could show the envelope data or the height at that boundary point and that sort of thing, if you want that to show instead. And you can also choose the way that this is formatted. As I said, you can choose where they want to go on the line, so we could make them all go below the line. We can change the dimensions they measure in, and the angle units that it's measured in, and you can modify the text settings as well. And then you can also change the attributes for the line itself. So you can choose the pen and pen color and line type and that sort of thing for the line, so that we can have that display differently, and it will just do that. So it's even if you are not necessarily using it to generate your mesh, or to generate the shape of the mesh at least, it's still useful as an indicator of where your boundaries are. So those are the boundaries and the boundary editor. You can close this once you're done with it as well. You just need it to actually place them or edit them. It'll come, if you open it again and select one of the boundaries, it'll pre-populate again with all of those items in there, so you're not going to lose anything by closing this. And I'm just going to use it to go ahead and make a mesh. So sites, I'm going to create a mesh from boundaries. It'll go through and make a mesh for me. I'm just going to throw a few contours on here so that we can look at the building envelope. So I'll select I'll draw some line work here. Obviously you will have actual contours that you'll probably want to put on, but I'm just going to draw something here. Just a moment while I do this. Mesh. Okay. And then let's elevate some of these so that we have some actual shape. Wow. Should have done this in advance, really, shouldn't I? So a 6 there. Right, is that giving us something sensible looking? Yes, I've got the reference plane. A bit weird, but that is looking pretty good. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use the one that was already on the project there, because I don't want to mess around with the heights and things. Obviously you already know how to manage the heights and things for your site meshes. So what I'm going to do here is, this one already has some elevated parts on it. So it's just got a handful of contours there. It's also got a cut in there for a kind of a driveway, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back the other way again. So I've got a mesh selected and I want to make boundaries using it. So I'll just go here and create boundaries from the polygon. So you can see it's gone and done those. I don't know why my object is defaulting to, why I have my object default settings set to this story. but you can see it's gone around and it's put those on and labelled them up for us, which is nice. And now we can generate a building envelope. So definitely in New Zealand at least, creating a building envelope so that you can tell if you're in compliance is an important part of the documentation, and so this tool will help you do that. I think in quite a few areas in Australia it already is, or it's becoming important as well, so hopefully it will be useful to you as well. But what it's going to do is it's going to elevate a sort of a shape over the top of our mesh, showing us the plane that you can't cut through, basically, so that you can easily see if your building is inside it or not. So the way that it works is you just select your mesh, go to CI Tools, Sites, and choose Place Building Envelope. It'll ask you what your rolling height is, if you actually have your your boundaries selected, which I will do now. Okay, so we have our boundaries on the same story as our mesh now. Let's run that again. It's going to ask us for our rolling height, so that's the height of the top of the shape that it's going to create for us. 8 meters, I think, is the default in most places, but you will enter whatever it is that is specified for you to enter here. We just hit OK, and it will generate that for us. It didn't really look like it did anything, but if I jump out to 3D now, you can see this. Oh, there's my boundaries from the previous mesh. Just get rid of those. You can see it's created this glass shape over the top of my mesh, and that is my building envelope. So this is a sort of a good visual indicator of what the shape is that you need to keep your building inside of, and of course you can go through to be able to check if you have protrusions. The best way that I've found to do that is to it defaults to glass so that you can see through it, which makes a lot of sense. But if you want to go through and look for parts where the building is cutting through, if you go through and set it to some nice solid color that's easy to spot, that's a good way to see if you have any building cutting through. So you can see a bit of the roof is cutting through over here, and we have a little bit of the edge of the deck over here, and another very small part of the roof there, but the rest of it looks pretty solid orange. So that's the parts that are cutting through in this case. So that's a good way to check for that, and then we can go back to that glass one so that it is usable as an actual project still, but you can still see what's going on. And because this is an actual 3D element that's sitting there, if we cut a section through, it will show on there as well. It's defaulted to have a soil material by default, which is not particularly useful, but if we change to airspace, you can see that we can now see in our section where the envelope is. This one's cutting it off, so it's not as useful, but this one here, you can see the recession planes on either side there, so that you can easily check in here, and that looks like that's the part of roof that was cutting through, so that gives us a nice clear representation of what is going on there. So this is really useful for checking that, and also for showing in your documentation that you don't cut through it. And there's a couple of different settings to the way that this works that we'll have a look at now. So you can see that obviously the start of the envelope goes straight upwards, and then it angles in at a certain angle here, and then it hits the rolling height, and that is matched to the contours, as you can see. So this contour here matches the contours of the base there, and you can see that the bottom of the envelope matches the contours there as well. So it follows that along for you. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have a look at the settings that control what those angles are. I'm just going to very briefly pause and check and see if we have any questions, and then I will be back. All right. All right, no questions at this stage. So we can control those angles by selecting the boundaries that correspond to them, or select all of them if you want to change them all at once. So I'm just going to grab this one here. I'm going to try and grab this one here. Let me go to the corner instead. Oh no, we've got this one here instead. So with that boundary selected, we can go into the settings. We'll see the same settings for the label that we looked at earlier, but the configuration and daylight angles list is what we're interested in for the purposes of this building envelope. So configuration, we've got it set for the envelope shape to be the listed daylight angle. So that is the angle that is listed in the next section here in this list. And there's a couple of settings controlling the way that it works here. So you can see that yard setback is set to 3 meters by default. So you can change that to whatever you need for that to be there. You can also choose to actually display the boundary in 3D. In almost all cases, you won't want to do this because you don't want to see that. But if you do want to see it for some reason, because you may be troubleshooting exactly what intersection is causing you to have problems or something, you can turn that on by switching this value on here. And then you can also choose whether you want to visualize the yard setback as well using this setting here. But the main thing that we want to look at is the list of daylight angles. So we'll go to daylight angles list, and you can see that listed here. So you will have, if you need to generate one of these, you will have a list of daylight angles that you can input into the different values that are available here. So we've got the boundary for each of the 4 compass points here, and then the angle that that setback comes off at. So each one of these is saying that you go straight up vertically for 2 meters, and then at the 2 meter mark you angle back at 55 degrees for the north boundaries until you hit the recession plane. Until you hit the rolling height. The west side is doing exactly the same, but it's going at 45 degrees instead. South is the same but 35, and east is the same as west. So they're both 45 degrees. So that's what it's doing by default. Depending on the council that you're working with, you may need to do additional changes here. So for instance, they may require more subdivisions than just 4. So there's control over that. You can go all the way up to 36 if you need to. The highest that I've seen, I think, is 16. But if you do need to go higher for some reason, that's available. So you can go through and change to the amount that you need, and then enter the subdivisions based on those in here. So you can say north, and we're going around clockwise essentially. So you say the first part of north is 2 meters 55 degrees, second part is 2 meters 45, third part is 2 meters 35, and so on. It will just keep going around like that. And also if you need it to interpolate between those divisions, so instead of jumping between each angle, you want it to just smoothly move through them, you can also tick this box here. Again, that's something that will be specified by the council that you're trying to make this work with. So that will go through and that will do what we tell it to do. So it creates those going up and then receding back and then hitting the rolling height settings. However, one of the other things that you might need to do is a more complex boundary. This is getting increasingly common. I think most of Auckland, for instance, uses these. And so we have an option to create your own angle, essentially, using the polyline method here. And what we can do here is we can say how many edges the boundary needs to have. So this default one here is 4, which seems to be pretty consistently what it is in most cases. So you set the amount of edges that you want, and then using this selected edge here, we go through and we choose what each edge needs to be. So edge 1, we're saying is vertical. It should go straight up, so 90 degrees straight up, and then it does that for 3.6 meters. So it will go up 3.6 meters is the first part of the polyline. Then we select edge 2. Now we're going horizontal, so we've gone to 0 degrees and we're going in 1 meter. So we're going straight up 3.6, back in 1 meter. Edge 3. We are measuring horizontally again, but this time we're going at 73.3 degrees. And we're going to do that for 1 meter as well. And then the last part is that we're still measuring horizontally, and we've gone to 45 degrees now, and that will keep going for 3 meters. I don't think there's many situations where you would go any further than that. So after that, it will hit the, what do we call it again? The rolling height, and then you'll see the rest of it. So if I'm just going to cancel out of there and select all of my boundaries so that we can see how the polyline method looks. So instead of going straight up and then coming back on one angle, we're going to use the polyline method that we just looked at, and we'll see how that looks. So I'll just hit OK there, and then jump back to our 3D view. And you'll be able to see that in this case, we're not actually even hitting the first kickoff on those. So I'm just going to modify those a bit so that we can actually see something happening. So I'm just going to make that first value 1500 instead, just so that we can see what's going on. Okay, so we're going up the amount that we said that we were going to, then we're going backward, then we're going up again, and then if we were high enough, it doesn't look like we are, we will get to that fourth value as well. So you'll be able to build this up to do what shape you need it to be, and then again, if you go to one of your, this was the better section, one of your section views, you'll be able to see the cut happening the way you've prescribed for it to there as well. So that is the building envelope function. There's also a handful of other parts of the Sites tool, mainly one that does zone areas, which I think maybe I'll look at next week because we've run out of time here today. But that is the Sites tool, and particularly the two parts of the Sites tool, the boundary entering and modification palette, and the building envelope system. That's the two main ones that have been used for a long time in New Zealand. Most of you probably already know about that one, but in Australia you may or may not be using that yet. And then we've got some other stuff to do with area ratios and that sort of thing. So I'll have a look at that in next week's session if you want to see that. Just before I finish up, I'm just going to see if there's any other questions, and then we can finish for today. Okay. All right, looks like no further questions at this stage, so we can finish up now. So thanks for coming, everyone. If you want to request anything to be shown at a future version of this webinar, just send us a support ticket. So email nz.support@centralinnovation.com or log into MyCI and go to the My Support section there. Do either of those and create a support ticket and just say, hey, during next week's CI Tools session, could you please show me how to, I don't know, create schedule notes in the Durham window schedules, or whatever it is that you want to know about, and that'll make its way back to me and I can cover those. So if you have any questions like that, send them through there. If you have any questions just about how to use the tools, or maybe you've started using them and you're not sure how to use certain parts, you can also ask the support team there about that as well. So you can say, hey, I've created a site boundary using the site tool, and I've added a rolling height, but I can't figure out how to make the yard setback be different or something like that. You can ask them any of those questions there as well. But yeah, definitely if you have any suggestions for future webinars, I've just about run out of all of the introduction to this tool sessions. I think we've got maybe 2 tools left, so I'll be looking for new topics to hit on once we finish those. So if you have any suggestions, that would be much appreciated. But otherwise, that's all from me for today. Thanks for your time, and I'll catch you at the next one.